Well, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So nice to have you here this morning. If you are here, please let us know. Put something in the comments box, just a quick hello, good morning, a question, a comment, anything that you would like to say. We would love to hear from you. So, good morning. Today, this is the Juniper Center Thrive Live, where we have conversations with guests to help clinicians and everybody else thrive and to normalize conversations around mental health, which we are trying always to do to make mental health be just kind of a normal thing that people talk about. So I'm glad you're here with us today. So today, someone I've known sort of peripherally for many years, including having my son take a martial arts class, is Margaret Vimont. We're going to be talking about our bodies, our boundaries, and self-defense for women and girls. Very, very exciting. Today, Margaret is going to be talking about we're going to be talking about boundaries and some about Impact Chicago, where she has been an instructor since 1992. Impact works to end violence and envisions a nonviolent world in which all people can live safely and with dignity. And by teaching self-defense, Impact provides women, girls, and people with disabilities with the tools they need to prevent, minimize, and stop violence. And I was just saying to Margaret a couple minutes ago, why aren't we all doing this? Margaret holds a fifth degree black belt in Tae Kwon Do, and she is a licensed clinical social worker at Nexus Family Healing, a child and family services agency where she is vice president of strategy. Welcome, Margaret Vimont. Well, good morning, Margaret. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Great to see you again, Margo.
Thank you. You as well. And again, thanks so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And again, for anyone who's watching live, please feel free to let us know you're there. Put something in the comments, say hi, ask a question. Margaret's a great resource. So, Margaret, I'm really glad we're talking about this topic for several reasons. First of all, during COVID, the danger right now feels like this bio bomb. Everybody's a bio bomb, and some of these conversations that I think started especially during the Me Too movement have, at least in the news feed, sort of fallen to the bottom. And occasionally things will come up. We just had the Maxwell trial where she was convicted, thank goodness, and so it was kind of back in the news. But of course, COVID and everything, all the impact of COVID seems to take precedence. So women and girls, really everybody, because this isn't just women and girls, but especially women and girls, because of the way we're trained, being able to talk about and understand boundaries physically and emotionally is something clinically I've been working with for years. So, just so folks know, we're going to talk about some things that might be triggering. Just be prepared, get yourself a little grounded, feel your feet. But Margaret, boundaries. Just if we start there, what do you think is a place that you would like to start in terms of people thinking about their emotional and physical boundaries?
Yeah, I think probably where I'd like to start is to just encourage all of us to grant ourselves some grace around these issues because, many of us, maybe most of us, have a sense that we've got boundaries that we're not protecting as well as we should if we're really thinking about what's right and true for us in our relationships and who we let in and in what ways, and how we protect some boundaries around ourselves, our families, our relationships, our work, and our thing. And that we all are negotiating those, and we have a sense about where our boundaries are, and but sometimes can be ambivalent about our right to defend them and to assert them. And so I just want to start by saying that if people listening to this are feeling that way, I think most of us are feeling that way, and that the setting boundaries and sort of feeling entitled to them is something that is a lifelong journey, and that hopefully as time goes on, we can give ourselves more permission to really only allow the things in our lives that are right for us in the right measure, and to feel entitled about actually setting some boundaries there. Just as you said in your opener, it's just the roots of this go from our very beginnings, about whether we got messages that we were mostly supposed to be concerned with the welfare of others, maybe at the expense of ourselves, and whether we actually had the right to decide what was right for us and what wasn't. And that goes, I know you talk to a lot of folks as we do about the challenges that they're facing. And, this can be everywhere from sort of mild boundary violations, just where, perhaps you're not taking care of yourself as well as you should, or as well as you're taking care of other people.
Right.
Or it can be, quite egregious where boundaries are violated in violent ways. And we have a lot of folks who come to Impact sort of looking for ways and practice and experience in establishing boundaries for themselves because they've experienced boundary violations of sexual assault or rape. And so in both the sort of what we might call milder end of the spectrum to the most egregious, boundary violations and the injuries that can happen when they when they're not actually respected run deep in us.
Yeah, very deep, Margaret, very deep. And I think you and I were having this conversation briefly before we started about, over the 30 some years I've been a therapist, if I was thinking of this morning, probably the number one issue I have worked on with women in particular is has something to do with boundaries. Is it okay for us to say no? When and how? And intellectually we get it, like, well, of course I have the right to say no. But then we completely doubt ourselves, right?
Yeah.
It's like, did that thing really happen? And I can tell you, I've had several incidents in my life. Some were mild, some were not. And we don't need to get into all of the details, but of things happening and something happening to me emotionally and even physically where I thought, did what just did it really happen? Did I make a mistake? Did I think I must be mistaken? That couldn't have happened. Because why would somebody do something like that? I mean, how common is that in your experience with folks?
Yeah, really common. And I think I both have and overhear a lot of conversations that women and girls have with each other to say, to try to get validation of, well, this happened and it didn't seem quite right. And trying to get some external sense of that. I think we can give ourselves some permission to actually validate our own experience and not what perhaps the aggressor was telling us happened or didn't happen, that, sort of we know that truth. So yes, I think that happens all the time. And also like looking for permission to actually set some boundaries there. Parents, mothers, sisters, our relationships, and so how much are we, what is the right balance of give and take in our lives? And then when we feel like that we've overstepped and maybe overextended, to give ourselves permission to non-apologetically reassert that boundary and to say, I actually need to protect more of my physical space or of my life space for certain things, and feeling okay about that. And helping others accept it, even if perhaps they weren't too happy with, what that meant for them.
Right, so. Right. And how important it is for us to do that for each other, right? That women need to be able to talk to other women and men need to be able to talk to each other. And we all need to be able to talk to each other. And I want to be really clear. We work at the Juniper Center with people of all genders and no gender. So this isn't just men, this isn't just women. This is people regardless of gender whose boundaries are violated, and I think people who tend to gender more masculine have so much shame about talking about it, right? So I just want to be clear that we're talking about people kind of across the board. But so when you're talking to people about what gets in the way, right? So we know it's happened. We sense something has happened. We want to say something back. We've been trained not to. What do you hear from women about their experiences, about why do we feel like we can't just open our mouths and say stop or no or back up or I don't want to do that or that's not okay?
Yeah. Well, part of it is that when we have experiences of fear and terror that can happen in these, where we feel large amounts of emotion. The other thing that I think we need to grant some grace on ourselves for is that we have biological responses that are natural, but they aren't evidently what we would choose if we had all choices, so that we may freeze, and then later on be able to say, well, this is exactly what I would have said, but that we freeze, right? Or that we like flail, do whatever the version of flailing is, and sort of like do something, but not something that was actually stating intentionally what we want, and being able to protect that boundary. And so that's actually one of the things that as I've been doing this Impact Chicago self-defense class for decades now, and one of the reasons that keeps me coming back to it is that part of it is that we've got to actually retrain ourselves, and that actually just deciding that you want to have better boundaries might not get you there, because you could decide what you wanted to do, but then get in the moment and find that you just couldn't do it. And so part of the design of Impact is that we actually do highly experiential adrenaline-based training. And so the idea is, and you're going to see some pictures here, because this goes from being able to set verbal boundaries, but also being able to set physical boundaries. So it does do the full gamut of training. So you're going to see some physical self-defense skills on the screen as the slides go, as well as some victory sort of classes of women celebrating their successes there. But part of what happens is that we team teach this. So we have a whistle lead instructor. That's the role that I and my colleagues play. And then we also have the suited instructor, as you can see there. And we have all male suited instructors in Chicago, and they're wearing head to toe body armor. And what happens in the class is that they are trained to play the role of the assailant. And so we actually create a very emotionally safe environment, in that the women are supporting each other. We do a lot of things to protect physical and emotional safety. But then as we're doing the scenarios, it actually creates adrenaline, because even though we're in a classroom and we're standing on a mat, the interaction between a person who is challenging your boundary, and then us, sort of practicing the skills that we're learning to get some experience with those, that feels like a very real human experience that's happening. And what we find is that the adrenaline and the feelings that happen in the class, just like they happen in real life. So the opportunity there, of course, is to practice a different response, because we're all there and we would have just learned a skill, and then we'll come out and say, okay, we're going to try it. And we've got all the support here. And if it goes badly, we'll stop and we'll start again. And that it allows you to have the flood of adrenaline, but to choose a different response. So we do practice with verbal boundaries. We do practice with physical boundaries, and how to actually react in a different way. And it's really layered, so that we build on the skills as the class goes on. It's a fairly intensive training experience. We have some shorter workshops and things, but our sort of signature course is called Core. And in order to do adrenaline-based training, you actually have to go through it, several times of different kinds of things and build. And so we start on Friday night for a few hours, and then it's between 6 and 8 hours on both Saturday and Sunday. And we really just train it. And what happens is that we start to be able to act inside the adrenalized state. And we're retraining what we can do in response to that emotional flood that we have. And, one of the things we say is, even if we could, we wouldn't remove fear in these experiences, because fear is very useful to us. It tells us that there's a potential threat. It gives us all sorts of adrenaline and things, but we don't want to be paralyzed by fear. We want to be able to have it, use as information, and then be able to choose our response. And that's really what Impact's all about.
Oh, it's so fabulous, Margaret, because this is the thing. And Rhonda has a great question. Any suggestions on how to handle emotional boundaries that are repeatedly forgotten? For sure. So this is so important, because as you said, we can know what we want to do. We can know what we want to say. We can say, well, if I was in that situation, I would blah, 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 blah. I wouldn't let him blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't let her blah, blah, or them. And guess what? The thing that happens, to your point, is that if you haven't done some adrenaline-based training, which means you get the adrenaline flowing, because when you're in an adrenaline-based state, your thinking part of your brain, literally, if we were to do a PET scan, it looks like it starts to go offline.
Mhm.
Like it
Right.
just goes. So the part of your brain that's saying, I would do blah, 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 all of a sudden you don't have access to that. You're in your instinctual parts of your brain. So you have to do that adrenaline-based training to be able to have the recall or the access to the information or the responses. It's not really information, it's a reaction, it's a response. You've got to be able to do that repeatedly over a number of hours, over a number of days to train your brain to respond from that place in a defensive way, as opposed to, I think I'm going to do such and such. Would you agree with that? Or what would you like to add?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't. That's beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think to Rhonda's question, which I might actually fork back over to you, is that the thing about impact training is that it can teach us how to do it. Right. So it's like, okay, so now I know how to do it. One of the things we say in impact is that once you finish the course, it's actually, in a way, the work has just begun. Because once you've developed the skill of setting a boundary, there's all this work that's a highly personal work, which is, so what are the right boundaries in my life? Where do I want to set them? Where is it appropriate to have certain kinds of responses? And where do I need to reconsider whole relationships? Because now that I am setting a boundary, I'm actually finding that it's not being respected. And, I know, like most of us, like I've had to have conversations with myself about certain kinds of relationships and whether or not they were actually right in the context of my life, given this issue of boundaries. So I feel like impact is about giving us the skill to do it. And then there's a whole nother piece of work, which I'm guessing that the Juniper Center folks help a lot of people with, which is now that I have this beginning skill, well, then where does it fit in my life? And where, how am I going to manage it and the implications?
Yeah, exactly, Margaret. Again, very well said. Right. Because that's it. I love that framework so that people understand, even if you have started the work, and Deanna Schoss, who is our marketing guru and also has done the impact training, and she's the producer of this show, took your training and was describing some of her own reaction. I mean, it is a very emotional response, especially if we have our own history. So we're going in and we are needing to address some of that, which is a really good thing, by the way, because if we can address it in something like impact, where there's safety, camaraderie, and that adrenaline-based training where you're practicing physically kicking, punching, screaming, it's really cathartic for our brains to be able to say, oh, here is a retraining of my brain. This is a redoing of this experience, and to feel like there's going to be an option for safety down the road. So when you're talking about, Rhonda, that how do you handle emotionally boundaries that are repeatedly forgotten, right? There's other people negating our boundaries, and then we forget the boundary, right? I mean, I had this situation this morning. I was a little bit in a hurry. Right now, I was getting on an elevator. A woman didn't have her mask on, and I had to think, oh, do I want to deal with this again? I mean, it's a little boundary, something small. Do I want? This week, I felt like I was the neighbor from H-E double bendy straws, because, do you have your mask before getting on the elevator? And I can feel like nasty, just asking somebody, do you have a mask before they get on the elevator? Imagine having to do boundaries repeatedly. It's tiring. We don't want to be mean. We don't want to not be nice, right? So it's easy to forget those boundaries. But to your point, there's something called in vivo response, in vivo training, which means in the situation, right? It's kind of an opportunity to practice something in real time. And so impact training is one of those. So Rhonda, if you have situations where you can actively remind yourself, I'm going to practice this, even if I don't think I really need to. It's practicing it even when we don't think we really need to, and practicing it intentionally, a boundary over and over and over again. I'm going to say no 10 times this week. 20 times this week, 5 times this week. I'm just going to say no to somebody and just watch what happens and see that the world will continue to spin. Everybody's going to be okay. Things don't collapse around us. And guess what? I love this saying. I don't know where it came from, but those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind, right? So people who are good for us are going to be okay with us saying no and setting boundaries. People who aren't, that's important information for us to have, kind of to your point, Margaret.
Right.
So if someone wants to do impact training, what can they expect? So you kind of talked about the time frame, that it's a number of days, it's a time commitment, which is great because your brain really needs that. It may feel like, oh, I don't have time to do that right now, but your brain really needs the hour after hour after hour.
Right.
What would someone do to register for your course, and what can they expect, or an impact course?
Sure. So Deanna is showing the website there. So that's the easiest way. That's where all the registration happens. And also, if you just like to talk to an impact person more about the course, and some people have some questions about, physically, is it right for me? I maybe, have something that I'm struggling with there. And so you can also just get a really quick phone call back and talk to one of us about impact. Classes are coming up here. And I am pleased to say that Impact is really dedicated to having as many women identified folks take this course as possible. So it's all based on a sliding fee scale. So you go in, if you want to, you can tell us some about your financial situation so that we can get you a price that would work for you. And again, the core program is a weekend program. So Friday evening and then Saturday and Sunday. So certainly the time commitment. And as far as what to expect, you can expect that almost everyone that walks through the door is feeling a lot of feelings of trepidation, anxiety, and fear. And that we have women in every class who have experienced sexual assault in their lives, and that's why they're there. We have women who are getting ready to go off to college, or are getting ready to go abroad, or to go launch their lives in a new city, and they just want to prepare themselves. So it's not that anything has happened, but they want to be ready for that. And maybe they want some more boundaries there. We have people that come that say, I'm here because I wanted my friend or daughter to take it, and they would only take it if I came. So we have all sorts of reasons why people come in a wide range. We've got ages. The women's class goes from age 16 through, we've had people in their early 80s take the class. So it's very accessible.
Wow.
Physically for most folks. So I would encourage you, if you think, oh, I'm not strong enough or something. We have people who are self-professed couch potatoes. Like, I do nothing. I know I should do something. I do nothing. And they've done fine. Now, it is tiring because it is physical, but it's very accessible. The truth about physical kind of practical fighting or self-defense is that the techniques that you use are not difficult. I mean, the physical thing, the difficult thing about fighting is the emotional decision about fighting. So the physical part, which sometimes people wonder if that's going to be difficult, it's not difficult to learn that. And we can very easily and very quickly show you how to use your hands and your feet for your own defense. The real work is the emotional decision about, when is it time for me to verbally set this boundary? When is it time for me to use my physical self-defense skills to defend myself? And that decision about when is it right is highly personal. And what I say is that you will know the answer to that question, and you will always be right. Even though your answer to that, Margot, and my answer about, like, when would I feel justified in using physical self-defense would be really different, and we would both be right. So what we do is we put these skills in, we give ourselves the ability to defend ourselves verbally and physically. And we all go off and decide, where does that fit in our lives? But the course is enormously supportive. So we've got, even when we're doing something where we're the only one doing it, the entire line of women is verbally cheering and supporting each other, because this just isn't something that we can do alone. I mean, these kinds of assaults and boundary violations, they frequently are very isolating. Sometimes the aggressor asks us to keep it secret, right? Because they don't want it exposed. And also, we can feel like that it was because of something we did or didn't do, or something that we are and that we aren't. And so it's very isolating. So Impact is a chance, as you said, to come together, to learn these skills in a highly supportive environment. and in a way that's very effective. The last thing we haven't said yet is how long it lasts. So the thing about adrenaline-based
Yeah.
training is that when you learn something that's adrenaline-based, it gets into you at a cellular level. And so we've had
Right.
women up to 8 years after just taking the core class, nothing else, been assaulted and used the techniques. Now, I'm
Wow.
telling you, as far as this like use of your brain that you were talking about, if I had shown up at her doorstep 2 days before and said, "Hi, I'm your impact instructor from 8 years ago. Could you show me that kick I taught you?" I'm sure there's no way, because
Right. It's
it
not
wasn't
living here.
actually the front of her brain that was remembering it. It was that when something happens in adrenaline state, it really sticks with you. One of my co-instructors
Yeah.
says that's why you never forget how to ride a bike, because it's really scary.
It
So
doesn't.
when you learn how to do it, you've got it
Yeah.
forever, even if it's been years. So
Right. I know what my knees are going to look like if I fall over. Yeah, exactly. Right. Margaret, I'm so glad you brought that up because, when we think about setting boundaries and changing behavior and the repetition that's needed and doing it in a situation where we are scared or where our emotional defenses are online, the learning doesn't have to live here,
right.
right? The learning gets to live in your instinctual parts of your brain. So, right? That's fabulous that 8 years later, they have been able to say, yep, it's still in there. So this really works and it stays. And have you heard from women that it is also generalizable to other parts of their lives, that they can set
Mhm.
boundaries in other areas just by doing the impact training? It gave them something that they didn't have before.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, a really common refrain we hear is, I just felt entitled to take up space in my own life, right? Wherever that is.
Yeah.
So asking for a promotion, going after the job you want, ending a relationship that's not good for you, just, being the star of your own movie and feeling
Mhm.
really entitled to do that. And I
Mhm.
have heard many, many women say that, hey, I never had to hit anybody. But I do want to tell you that I'm just bigger, in my life,
Yes.
because of feeling entitled to set and defend my boundaries, whether it's the boundaries of my body or the boundaries of my life.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Right. So part of that adrenaline based training isn't just now I will remember how to punch. It breaks through some kind of internal barrier that we have around taking care of ourselves, around being able to take space, around being able to say yes or no when we feel like it. So there's a lot that people can get from this. I love it. So Rhonda is also asking, where is the impact training held?
Yeah, great question, because anyone could be anywhere listening to this. So, if you happen to be local to where Juniper Center is, so Impact Chicago, we hold it in different places around Chicagoland. So you'll see that we're always in a different place. We don't have a home studio. It allows us to be more flexible, to bring it to different parts of the city. So you'll see those coming up on the website. Now, if you are in a different city, there is an organization called Impact International. And I believe we're going to put that website up too. And that will show you the cities that Impact chapters are. And hopefully you'll find one that is that it will be close enough for you to access.
Wow.
So Impact International is where those are, and they are scattered throughout the nation.
Love it. And I saw it looks like girls as young as 12 can take this training.
Right. So we do have, I'm so glad that we got to that. We've got a shorter class for middle school girls. So once you hit high school, we go ahead and recommend that you'd be in the women's class, at least if you're 16 or older. But we do have one for girls 12 to 15 that is really geared towards middle school girls. So that's going to deal with situations where you might need to be setting a boundary, say with an adult, right? Or with a bully, or those kinds of situations to their life. So it is not quite as focused on sexual assault, and it doesn't go as deeply into those kinds of scenarios. So it's really geared towards what's relevant for that age range. So that is actually 2 4-hour days, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. And we've got 2 or 3 of those in the schedule for 2022. So those are coming
That's
up as well.
so fabulous, Margaret. I hadn't thought about that to help a girl set limits around boundaries. I have a little kiddo I'm going to be sending your way today. A girl that I'm working with. So that's fabulous, right? Because bullying, as we know, is huge and it's gotten worse during COVID, sadly. So this is something that so many kids can use right now, but information that everyone can benefit from. I highly recommend all of you, please take a look, impactchicago.org. There's Facebook at Impact Chicago. Margaret Vimont, always delightful to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking about this really important topic. Thank you, Rhonda, and others who have watched today. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Be well.
Thanks so much for having me, Margo. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Be well, everyone.